Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, The Dementors. Tom woke Harry next morning with his usual toothless grin and a cup of tea. Harry got dressed and was just persuading a disgruntled Hedwig to get back in with her cage when Ron banged his way into the door, pulling a sweatshirt over his head and looking irritable. The sooner we get on the train, the better, he said. At least I can get away from Percy at Hogwarts. Now he's accusing me of dripping tea on his foot of Penelope Clearwater. You know, Grimness, his girlfriend. She's hidden her face under the frame because her nose has gone all blotchy. I've got something to tell you, Harry began, but they were interrupted by Fred and George, who had logged in and congratulated Ron on informing Percy again. They headed down to breakfast, where Mr. Weasley was reading the front page of Daily Prophet with a furrowed brow. And Mrs. Weasley was telling Hermione and Ginny about a love potion she'd make as a young girl. All three of them were rather giggly. What were you saying? Harry asked Harry as they sat down. Later, Harry muttered as Percy stormed in. He had no chance to speak to Ron or Hermione in the chance of leaving. They were too busy heaving all of their trunk down the glacial cauldron and narrow staircase, and peeling them near the door, with Hedwig and Hermes, Percy screeched out, perched on the top in their cage. A small wickerwork basket stood beside the heap of trunk, spurting loudly. It's all right, Crookshank, Hermione cooed through the work, wickerwork. I'll let you out on the train. You won't, snapped Ron. What about poor Scabbard, eh? He pointed his chest, a large lump indicated Scabbard curled up in his pocket. Mr. Weasley had been outside waiting for the ministry. Carr struck his head out inside. They're here, he said. Come, Harry, come on. Mr. Weasley marched Harry across a short stretch of pavement toward the first of the two old-fashioned dark green cars, each of which was driven by a furtive-looking wizard wearing a suit of emerald velvet. "In you get, Harry," said Mr. Weasley, glancing up and down the crowded street. Harry got into the back of his car and was shortly joined by Hermione, Ron, and to Ron's disgust, Percy. The journey to the King Cross was uneventful compared to the Harry trip onto the night bus. The Ministry magic cars seemed almost ordinary, though Harry noticed that they would slide through gaps that Uncle Vernon knew company cars certainly wouldn't have managed. They reached King Cross. They reached King Cross with 20 minutes to spare. The Ministry driver found them trolley, unloaded their trunk, touched their hat to Mr. Weasley, and drove away. Somehow managed to jump to the head of a moving queer traffic light. Mr. Weasley kept close to Harry's elbows all the way into the station. Right then, he said, glancing around them. Let's do this in pair. As there's so many of us, I'll go through first with Harry. Mr. Weasley strolled toward the barrier between platform 9 and 3/4. Platform 9 and 10. Pushing Harry trolley and apparently very interested in the inner city 125 that had just arrived at platform 9. With a meaningful look at Harry, he leaned casually against the barrier. Harry imitated him. Next moment, they had fallen sideways through the solid mantle onto platform 9 and 3/4, and looked smoke over the platform packed with witches and wizards seeing their children onto the train. Percy and Ginny suddenly appeared behind Harry. They were panting, and they had apparently taken the barrier at a run. Ah, there's Penelope, said Percy, smoothing his hair and going pink again. Ginny caught Harry's eyes, and they both turned away to hide their laughter. As Percy strode over to the girl with long curly hair, walking with his chest thrown out so that she couldn't miss his shiny badge. Once the remaining Weasley and Hermione joined them, Harry and Ron led the way to the end of the train, past pack compartment to a carriage that looked quite empty. They loaded the trunk onto it, stowed Hedwig and Crookshank in the luggage rack, then went back outside to say goodbye to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Mrs. Weasley kissed all her children, but then Hermione, and finally, Harry. He was embarrassed, but really quite pleased when she gave him an extra hug. Do take care, won't you, Harry? She said as she strained up her eyes oddly bright. Then she opened her enormous handbag and said, I've made you all a sandwich. Here you are, Ron. No, they're not corned beef. Fred, where's Fred? Here you are, dear. Harry, said Mr. Weasley quickly, come over here a moment. He jerked his head toward a pillar, and Harry followed behind him, leaving the other crowded around Mrs. Weasley. There's something I've got to tell you before you leave, and Mr. Weasley in a tense voice. It's all right, Mr. Weasley, said Harry. I already know. You know? How could you know? I heard you and Mrs. Weasley talking last night. I couldn't help hearing. Harry added quickly. Sorry. That's not the way I've chosen for you to find out, said Mr. Weasley, looking anxious. No, honestly, it's okay. This way. You haven't broken your word to Fudge, and I know what's going on. Harry, you must be very scared. I'm not, said Harry sincerely. Really, he added, because Mr. Weasley was looking disbelieving, and I'm not trying to be a hero, but seriously, if Sirius Black can be worse than Dumbledore, can he? Mr. Weasley flinched at the sound of name, but overlooked it. Harry, I knew you were, well, made of strong stuff, that Fudge seemed to think, and I'm obviously pleased that you're not scared, but, Arthur, called Mrs. Weasley, who was now shepherding the rest into the train. Arthur, what are you doing? It's about to go. He's coming, Molly, said Mr. Weasley, but he turned back at Harry and kept talking in a low, more hurried voice. Listen, I want to give you my word that I'll give you that I'll be good boy and stay in the castle, said Harry gloomily. Not entirely, said Mr. Weasley, who looked more serious than Harry had ever seen him. Harry, swear to me you won't go looking for Black. You stare. What? There was a loud whistle. Guard walking along the train, slamming all the doors shut. Promise me, Harry, said Mr. Weasley. Said Mr. Weasley, talking more quickly still. Whatever happened, why should I go looking for someone you don't want to kill me? Said Harry blankly. Swear to me that whatever you might hear. Arthur, quickly! Cried Mrs. Weasley. Steam was blowing from the train. It started to move. Harry ran on the compartment door, and Ron threw it open and stood back to let him on. They leaned on the window and waved at Mr. and Mrs. Weasley until the train turned the corner and blocked them from view. I need to talk to you in private. Harry murmured to Ron and Hermione to go. The train pick up speed. Go away, Ginny, said Ron. Oh, that's nice, said Ginny huffily, and she stalked off. Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off down the corridor. This only had one occupant, a man sitting fast asleep next to the window. Harry, Ron, and Hermione checked on the threesole. The Awkward Express was usually reserved for students, and they had never seen an adult there before, except for the witch who pushed the food trolley. The stranger was wearing an extremely shabby set of wizard robe, which had been darned in several places. He looked ill and exhausted, though he seemed quite young. His light brown hair was flecked with gray. Who do you reckon he is? Ron hissed as they sat down and slid the door shut, taking the seat furthest away from the window. Professor Remus J. Lupin? Whispered Hermione at once. How'd you know that? It's on his case, replied Hermione, pointing at a luggage rack over the man's head, where there was a small battered case held together with a large quantity of nearly knotted string. The name Professor R.J. Lupin. That's Remus something Lupin. Remus maybe Jim Lupin. Remus Jane Lupin. I don't know. Wonder what he teaches, said Ron, frowning at Professor Lupin profile. That's obvious, whispered Hermione. There's only one defense, isn't it? Defense against the dark art. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had already had two defense against the dark art teacher, both of whom had only lasted 1 year. There were rumors that job that would jinx. Well, I hope he's up to it, said Ron doubtfully. He looked like one good hex would finish him off, doesn't he? Anyway, Johnny Harry, what are you going to tell us? Harry explained all about Mr. and Mrs. Weasley argument and the warning Mr. Weasley, just taken nap, had just given him. When he finished, Ron looked thunderstruck, and Hermione had her hand over her mouth. She finally lowered them to say, Sirius Black escaped to come after you. Oh, Harry, you'll have to be really, really careful. Don't go looking for trouble, Harry. I don't go looking for trouble, said Harry Needle. Trouble usually find me. How thick would Harry have to go looking for another who wanted to kill him? Said Ron shakily. They were taking the news worse than Harry had expected. Both Ron and Hermione seemed to be much more frightened of Black than he was. No one knew how he'd get out of Azkaban, said Ron uncomfortably. No one's ever done it before, and he was a top security prisoner too. Security, but they'll catch him, won't they? Said Hermione earnestly. I mean, they've got a muggle looking out for him too. What's the noise? Said Ron suddenly. A faint, tiny sort of whistle was coming from somewhere. They looked all around the compartment trunk. It's coming from the trunk, Harry, said Ron, standing up and reached the luggage rack. A moment later, he pulled a pocket snecoscope out from between Harry's robe. It was spinning very fast in the palm of Ron's hands and glowing brilliantly. Is that a snecoscope? Said Hermione interestedly, standing up for a better look. Yeah, mind you, it's a very cheap one, Ron said. It went wired just as I was tying it to Errol's leg to send it to Harry. Were you doing anything untrustworthy at the time? Said Hermione truly. Well, no, I was supposed to be using Errol. You know, he's not really up to a long journey. But how else I was supposed to get Harry present to him? Stick it back in the trunk, Harry advised, as the snecoscope whistled piercingly, or it will wake him up. Harry nodded toward Professor Lupin. Ron stuffed the snecoscope into a particularly horrible pair of Uncle Vernon's old sock, which standed on the sound, then closed the lid of a trunk on it. We could get a check in Hogsmeade, said Ron, sitting back down. They sell that sort of thing in Dervish and Bing's magical instrument and stuff. Fred and George told me. Do you know much about Hogsmeade? Asked Hermione keenly. I've read it. It's only entirely non-Muggle settlement in Britain. Yeah, I think it is, said Ron, in an often sort of way, but that's not why I wanted to go. I just want to get inside Honeydunk. What's that? Said Hermione. It's the sweet shop, said Ron, a dreamy look coming from his face, where they've got everything. Pepper M's they made you smoke and mouth, and great fat choco ball full of strawberry mousse and cod cream and a real excellent sugar quill, which you can suck in class just to look like you're thinking what to write next. But Hogsmeade, a very interesting place, isn't it? Hermione pressed on eagerly. Instead of historical Socracy, it says the inn was the headquarters for the 1612 Goblin Rebellion, for the Shrieking Shack, supposed to be the most severely haunted building in Britain. And massive striker ball that you make love at a few inches of the ground while you're sucking them, said Ron, who was plainly not listening to what Hermione was saying. I'm going to look around at Harry. Won't it be nice to get out of school for a bit and explore Hogsmeade? I expect it will, said Harry heavily. You'll have to tell me when you've found out. What do you mean? Said Ron. I can't go. The Dursley didn't sign a permission form, and Fudge wouldn't either. Ron looked horrified. You're not allowed to come? But no way. McGonagall or someone will give you permission. Harry gave a hollow laugh. Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House, was very strict. Or we can ask friend George. They knew every secret passage out of the castle. Ron, said Hermione sharply. I don't think Harry should be sneaking out of school with Black on the loose. You expect that's what McGonagall will say. We'll say when I ask for permission, said Harry bitterly. But if we're with him, said Ron spiritedly to Hermione, Black wouldn't dare. Oh, Ron, don't talk rubbish, snapped Hermione. Black already murdered a whole bunch of people in the middle of a crowded street. Do you really think he's going to worry about attacking her just because we're there? She was fumbling with a strap of crochet basket as she spoke. Don't let that thing out, Ron said, but too late. Crookshank leapt lightly from the basket. Stretch yawned, sprang onto Ron's knees. The lump in Ron's pocket trembled and he shook Crookshank angrily away. Get out of it! Ron, don't, said Hermione angrily. Ron was about to answer back when Professor Lupin stirred her. They watched him apprehensively, but he suddenly turned his head the other way, mouth slightly open, and slept on. The Hogwarts Express moved steadily north, and the scenery outside the window became wider and dark while the cloud overhead thickened. People were chasing backward and forward past the door of their compartment. Crookshank had now settled into an empty seat, his squashed face turned toward Ron, his yellow eyes on Ron's top pocket. At 1 o'clock, the plump witch with a fruit trolley arrived at the compartment door. Do you think we should wake him up? Ron asked awkwardly, nodding toward Professor Lupin. He looked like he could do with some food. Hermione approached Professor Lupin cautioningly. Professor, she said. Excuse me, Professor. He didn't move. Don't worry, dear, said the witch as she handed Harry a large stack of cauldron cakes. If he's hungry when he wake, I'll be up front with the drivers. I suppose he is sleeping, said Ron quietly. I mean, he hasn't died, has he? No, no, he's breathing, whispered Hermione, taking the cauldron cake Harry past her. He might not be a very good company, but Professor Lupin, present in his compartment, no, he might not be, but Professor Lupin had its issue mid-afternoon, just as it started to rain, blurring the rolling hill. Mid-afternoon, just as it started to rain. Draco Malfoy and Harry have been enemies ever since they had met on their first train journey to Hogwarts. Malfoy, who had a pale, pointed, sneering face, was in Slytherin houses. He played Seeker on Slytherin Quidditch team, the same position that Harry played on the Gryffindor team. Grey Bay and Gorley seemed to exist to do Malfoy binding. They were both wide and muscleless. Grey Bay was the taller, with a pudding bassin hairnet and a very thick neck. Gorley was short, bristly hair and long gorilla arms. Well, well, look who it is, said Malfoy in his usual lazy drawl, pulling open the compartment door. Potty and Weasel. Grabe and Gorley chuckled foolishly. I heard your father finally got his hand on some gold this summer, Weasley, said Malfoy. Did your mother die of shock? Ron stood up so quickly he knocked Crookshank basket to the floor. Professor Lupin gave a snort. Who's that? Said Malfoy, taking an automatic step backward. As he spotted Lupin, new teacher, said Harry, who had got to his feet too, in case he needed to hold Ron back. What were you saying, Malfoy? Malfoy's pale eyes narrowed. He wasn't a fool to pick up right under the teacher's nose. Come on, he muttered resolutely to Grabe and Goyle. They disappeared. Harry and Ron sat down again. Ron massaging his knuckle. I'm not going to take any rubbish from Malfoy this year, he said angrily. I mean it. If you make one more crack about my family, I'm going to get hold of his head. And Ron made a violent gesture in midair. Ron, hissed Hermione, pointing at Professor Lupin. Be careful! But Professor Lupin was still fast asleep. The rain thickened as the train sped yet further north. The windows were now a solid shimmering gray, which gradually darkened until lantern flickered into life all along the corridor and over the luggage rack. The train rattled, the rain hammered, the wind roared, but still Professor Lupin slept. "We must be nearly there," said Ron, leaning forward to look past Professor Lupin at the narrow, completely black window. The word had hardly left him when the train started to slow down. "Brilliant," said Ron, getting up and walking carefully past Professor Lupin to try and see outside. "I'm starving. I want to get to the feast." "We can't be there yet," said Hermione, checking her watch. "So why are we stopping?" The train was now getting slower and slower. As the noise of the piston fell away, the wind and the rain sounded louder than ever against the window. Harry, who was nearest the door, got up to look in the corridor. All on the carriage head were sticking curiously out of the compartment. The train came to a stop with a jolt and distant thud, and bang told them that luggage had fallen out on the rank. Then, without warning, all the lamp went out, and they were plunged into total darkness. "What's going on?" said Ron's voice from behind Harry. "Ouch!" gasped Hermione. "Ron, that was my foot." Harry felt his way back to his seat. "Do you think we've broken down?" "Dunno." There was a squeaking sound, and Harry saw a dim black outline of Ron wiping a patch clean on his nose, peering outside. There's something moving out there," Ron said. "I think people are coming abroad." The compartment door suddenly opened, and someone fell painfully over Harry's leg. "Sorry, Jew, what's going on?" "Ouch, sorry." "Hello, Neville," said Harry, feeling around the dark and pulling Neville up by his cloak. "Harry, is that you? What's happening?" "No idea. Sit down." There's a loud hissing and yell of pain. Neville tried to sit in Crookshank. "I'm going to go ask the driver what's going on," came Hermione's voice. Harry felt her pass him, heard the door slid open again, and then a thud, and two loud squeals of pain. "Who's that? Who's that? Ginny? Hermione? What are you looking? What are you doing?" "I was looking for Ron." "Come in and sit down." "Not here," said Harry hurriedly. "I'm here." "Ouch!" said Neville. "Quiet!" said a hoarse voice suddenly. Professor Lupin appeared to have woken up at last. Harry could hear. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Harry could hear movement in his corner. None of them spoke. There was a soft crackling noise and a shivering light filled with the compartment. Professor Lupin appeared to be holding a handful of flame. They illuminated his tired gray face, but his eyes looked alert and wary. "Stay where you are," he said in the same hoarse voice, and he got slowly to his feet with his handful of fire held out in front of him. But the door slid open before Lupin could reach it. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by shivering flame in Lupin's hand, was a cloaked figure that towered the ceiling. It faced completely beneath its hood. Harry's eyes darted downward, and what he saw made his stomach contract. There was a hand producing from a cloak, and was glistening, grayish, slimy looking, and scabbed like something dead that had decayed in the water. It was visible only for a split second, as stood the creature beneath the cloak. Since Harry gazed, the hand was suddenly withdrawn and folded its black material, and then the thing beneath the hood, whatever it was, drew a long, slow, rattling breath, as though it was trying to suck something more than air from its surrounding. An intense cold swept over them all. Harry felt his own breath catch in his chest. The cold went deeper than his skin. It was inside his chest. It was inside his very heart. Harry's eyes rolled up in his eyes. He couldn't see. He was drowning in cold. There was a rushing in his ears of the water. He was being dragged downward, the roaring growing louder. And then from far away, he heard screaming, terrified, pleading scream. He wanted to help whoever it was. He tried to move his arm, but couldn't. A thick white fog was swirling around him, inside him. Harry, are you all right?" Someone was slapping him. His face. "What?" Harry opened his eyes. There was a lantern above him, and the floor shaking. The awkward express was moving again, and the light had come back on. He seemed to have slid out of his seat on the floor. Ron and Hermione were kneeling next to him, and above them he could see Neville and Professor Lupin watching. Harry felt very sick. When he put his hand to push his glass back on, he felt cold sweat on his face. Ron and Hermione heaved him back onto his seat. "Are you okay?" Ron asked nervously. "Yeah," said Harry, looking quickly toward the door. The hooded creature had vanished. "What happened? Where's that that thing? Who screamed? No one screamed, asked Ron. Said Ron more nervously still. He looked around the bright company. Ginny and Ella looked back at him, both very pale. But I heard screaming. A loud snap made them all jump. Professor Lupin was breaking an enormous slab of chocolate into pieces. Here, he jeered, handing him a particularly large piece. Eat it. It will help. Harry took the chocolate, but didn't eat it. What was that thing? He asked Lupin. A Dementor's, said Lupin, was giving chocolate to everyone else. One of the Dementors of Azkaban. Everyone stared at him. Professor Lupin crumpled up the empty chocolate wrapper and put it inside his pocket. Eat, he repeated. It will help. I need to speak to the driver. Excuse me. He strolled past Harry and disappeared into the corridor. Are you sure you're okay, Harry? Said Hermione, watching Harry anxiously. I don't get it. What happened? Said Harry, wiping more sweat off his face. Well, that thing, the Dementor, stood there and looked around. I mean, I think it did. I can see its face. And I thought you were having a fit or something, said Ron, who still looked scared. You were sort of rigid and fell out of your seat and started twitching. And Professor Lupin stepped over you and walked toward the Dementor and pulled out his wand, said Hermione. And he said none of us is hiding Sirius Black under a cloak. Go, but the Dementor didn't move. So Lupin muttered something, and a silvery thing shot out his wand at it, and it turned around and sort of glided away. It was horrible, said Evelyn in a higher voice than usual. Did you feel how cold it went when it came in? I felt weird, said Ron, shifting his shoulder comfortably, like I'd never be cheerful again. Ginny was huddled in her corner, looking nearly as bad as Harry felt, gave a small sob. Hermione went over and put a comforting arm around her. But didn't any of you fall off your seat? Said Harry awkwardly. No, said Ron, looking anxiously at Harry. Ginny was shaking a little mad, though. Harry didn't understand. He felt weak and shivery as he was recovering from a bad bout of flu. He also felt the beginning of shame. Why had he gone to peace like that when no one else had? Professor Lupin had come back. He paused as he entered, looked around and said with a small smile, I haven't pushed that chocolate, you know. Harry took a bite and, to his great surprise, felt warmth spread suddenly to the tip of his finger and toes. We'll be at Hogwarts in 10 minutes, said Professor Lupin. Are you all right, Harry? Harry didn't ask how Professor Lupin knew his name. Fine, he murmured, embarrassed. They didn't talk much during the remainder of the journey. At long last, the train stopped at Hogsmeade Station, and there was a great scream to get out. Alice hooted, cat meowed, and Neville Pettoad croaked loudly from under his hat. It was freezing on a tiny platform, beckoning the terrified-looking new student for their traditional journey across the lake. All right, you three? Hagrid yelled over the head of the crowd. They waved at him, but it had no chance to speak to him before the mass of people around them, shunting them away the platform. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the stagecoach, waited for the remaining student. Each pulled, Harry could only assume, by an invisible horse, because when they climbed inside one and shut the door, the coach set off all by itself, bumping and swaying in position. The coach smelled faintly of molten straw. Harry felt better since chocolate, but still weak. Ron and Hermione kept looking at him sideways, as though frightened he might collapse again. As the carriage shuttled toward the pair of magnificent wrought iron gates, flanked with a stone column, topped with wing boards, he saw two more towering, hooded Dementors standing guard on either side. A wave of gold sickness threw an engulfed him again. He leant back in the lumpy seat and closed his eyes until they had passed the gate. The carriage picked up speed on the long, sloping drive up to the castle. Hermione was leaning out of the tiny window, watching the many turrets and tower drew nearer. At long last, the carriage swayed to the halt, and Hermione and Ron get out. As Harry stepped, oh my God. A drawing, delighted voice sounded in his ear. You fainted, Porter. Is Longbottom telling the truth? You actually fainted? Malfoy elbowed past Hermione to block Harry way up the stone himself to the castle, his face gleeful and his pale eye glinting maliciously. Shove off, Malfoy, said Ron, whose jaw was clenched. Did you faint as well, Weasley? Said Malfoy loudly. Did the scary old Dementor frighten you too, Weasley? Is there a problem? Said a mild voice. Professor Lupin had just got out of the next carriage. Malfoy gave Professor Lupin an insolent stare, which took in the patch on his robe and a displayed suitcase with a tiny hum of sarcasm in his voice. He said, "Oh, no, Professor." Then he smirked gravely and goyly and led them up the step into the castle. Hermione prodded Ron in the back of his back to make him hurry. The three of them joined the crowd and swarming up the step through the giant oak from door in the carved entrance hall, which was lit through flaming torches and housed a magnificent marble staircase which led up the doors. The door in the great hall stood open on the right. Harry followed the crowd toward it, but it barely glimpsed the enchanted ceiling, which was black and cloudy tonight, when a voice called, "Porter, Granger, I want to see you both." When Hermione turned around, surprised, Professor McGonagall, Transfiguration teacher and head of Gryffindor houses, was calling over the head of the crowd, and she was a stern-looking witch who wore her hat in a tight bun. Her sharp eyes were framed with square spectacles. Harry fought his way over to making him feel that he must have done something wrong. "There's no need to look so worried. I just want a word in my office," she told them. "Move along there, Weasley." Consider Professor McGonagall usher Harry and Hermione away from the chattering crowd. They accompanied her across the entrance hall, up the marble staircase, and along the corridor. Once they were in her office, a small room with a large welcoming fire, Professor McGonagall motioned Harry and Hermione to sit down. She settled herself behind her desk, and abruptly, "Professor Lupin sent an owl had to say that you were taken ill on the train, Porter." Before Harry could reply, there was a soft knock on the door, and Madame Pomfrey, the matron, came bustling in. Harry felt himself going red in the face. It was bad enough that he had passed out and whatever he had done without making all this fuss. "I'm fine," he said. "I don't need anything." "Oh, it's you, is it?" said Madame Pomfrey, ignoring this and bending down to stare closely at him. "I suppose you've been doing something dangerous again." "It was Dementor, Poppy," said Professor McGonagall. They exchanged a dark look, and Madame Pomfrey clucked disapprovingly. "Setting Dementors around the school," she muttered, pushing Harry back and feeling his forehead. "He won't be the last one to collapse. Yes, he'll all claim a terrible thing. And the fact they have on people are already delegated." "I'm not delegated," said Harry crossly. "Of course you're not," said Madame Pomfrey absent-mindedly. Now, taking his pulse, "What does he need?" said Professor McGonagall crisply. "Bed rest? Should he perhaps be tonight in the hospital wing?" Spend. "I'm fine," said Harry, jumping up. The idea of what Draco Malfoy would say if he had to go to hospital was torture. "Well, he should have some chocolate at the very least," said Madame Pomfrey, instead trying to peer in Harry's eyes. "I've already had some," said Harry. "Professor Lupin gave me some. He gave it to all of us." "Did he now?" said Madame Pomfrey approvingly. "So we've finally got a defense against dark art teacher who know his from Mendes." "Are you sure you feel all right, Porter?" said Professor McGonagall sharply. "Yes," said Harry. "Very well. Kindly wait outside while I have a quick word with Miss Granger about her timetable. Then we can go down to the feast together." Harry went back to the corridor with Madame Pomfrey, who left the hospital wing, murmured himself. A few minutes, then Hermione emerged looking very happy about